So, hello, this is February 1st. Big things are going on with the Super Bowl, the Patriots, and an office hour here for us this week. I have fully gotten very consumed by this thing right here. Today in the mail, I got my first print edition of the Maltese Jordans. This says proof copy on it, and it's crazy. I've been doing a lot of stuff on here that has involved my new endeavor into independent publishing, really doing this stuff on my own. And I know Kate has been there and done some of this, and I've been doing a lot with the ebooks. And with the release of this book, I've been working on it for a long time, and I'm really excited to do some stuff with the print version. So I'm reaching out through my email list and Facebook and some other things, including Patreon, to offer people to let people know the print book is coming, and I'm really excited about that. And to let people go ahead and buy that through me to get signed copies before it officially comes out. So I'm going to be offering those on my website. I'm working on the website page over here, which is kind of in process. And I'm also going to do that through my Patreon account in a way that people can doing all this web stuff. This is crazy. So once you get to the point where you're releasing books on your own, there's a lot involved, and I'm on a steep learning curve here with this. But it's interesting. So one of the things that I'm doing is making a page on my website where people can order copies of the book. Still playing around with the pricing. Have a button for PayPal, and so I'll let people either buy it here on my website or go to Patreon, where there's a special offer that if people buy it through Patreon before February 17th, then they get the ebook for free, the audio episodes, and their name in the acknowledgments of the book. So everything is ready, and I'm holding off because I'm still editing the acknowledgments to put some people who come in on the Patreon through that. So very exciting. There's this Patreon special offer that starts on Sunday at noon, and I'm going to be doing a live feed around that. I've never done a live feed like this before or a release like this before. I've done a lot of releases of different ways, and this is kind of what has been consuming me. So I'm happy to talk about your questions about writing, and I'm happy to talk about this craziness that I now feel that I'm a part of, and it's nice to see you guys. Welcome. I've been doing the Patreon thing for a while, and my friend John, so John has come over there, and I call him my friend because he's been a longtime listener to my podcasts, and he's been over there supporting me on Patreon, which is awesome. So he's definitely going into the acknowledgments. Everyone who's already on Patreon goes into the acknowledgments. You're in there, Liz. And it's really interesting because I've been doing these office hours for a while, and I announce them on Patreon, and usually it's all students. But John is here, which is exciting for me because he really knows me more through reading and listening to my fiction than as a teacher. So we have kind of a special guest in the audience today. Welcome. So let's dive in. How are you guys doing? What are you interested in? What should we talk about? What questions can I answer? We also have two new people from my current Stanford class that are going on. Sandy is here from the Cape, and Melanie, I've never seen you before. Welcome. It's great to have you here.
Seth, what is Patreon? How can we, and I'd love to listen to your podcast. Is it a website or?
Yeah, thanks for asking.
What is it, patrion.com or?
Patreon.com. So if you go to my website, which is sethharwood.com, there's a link up here that says Patreon, but then I'm making this new page where people like Juna, hi Juna, can order my book on PayPal because she's a little afraid of Patreon. But if you click on this button, which says Patreon, I just made this link. I just figured out how to do this with HTML, geeked out for a minute, figured it out. It works. So there's a link here where I'm just going to mute a couple of you guys because I'm hearing some weird feedback. Hey, Lynn and Jen. Hello, everybody. So we're talking about Patreon a little bit. So this is Patreon, which is a place where people can subscribe to get my podcasts and the office hours. So one of the cool things about Patreon is that this is where I've been posting all the recorded office hours as audio and video. So there's a lot of good content to go back through in here where we've talked about all sorts of things. We've been doing these for an hour a month. And mostly when an episode comes out, I try to catalog sort of what content we've gone over. So here we talk about New Year's resolutions, Patterson with Bill Clinton. And so the office hours ones are all here as video and audio. There's Liz and Bennett and Juna. Here is the Maltese Jordans, where I've done 18 episodes of audio. I'm 2 episodes away from finishing that up, and that will come out soon. The last 2 episodes as audio. And then there's some In Broad Daylight episodes of me reading the audio, and some short stories and other things like that. And then there's also this new thread where I talk about this whole independent publishing thing. And this post today will be a part of that, as well as this, the upcoming special offer on Patreon. So the Patreon has this new tool that I want to try out, which is for a limited time, you can offer people something that they don't get otherwise. So if you enter as a patron during this period, you can buy the book on there, get into the acknowledgments, and everyone who's a patron gets the ebook for free on February 17th, which is my 2-year anniversary of being on Patreon. It's exciting and kind of crazy stuff. I mean, as an author, one of the things is that I've had to do things a lot of different ways. I was giving away the podcast for free for a long time to build an audience. I've worked with different publishers. I've done different kinds of publishing models. This is my second pre-order. That was a big deal. I did a pre-order with Young Junius where we created this, so we did a special edition a few years ago with Young Junius that was a hardcover. We had a fancy back that one of my friends designed, and then it had like pictures in the middle, special end papers. It was a limited edition. All kinds of fancy things happened with this. We had pictures of the Food Master and other locations from the book in the middle. This fancy ribbon, bookmark, and the signature inside the cover. So this was a lot of fun. I did this a few years ago, and now I'm just doing the paperback with the Maltese Jordans, and it's just something to do that's fun to let people who are my students and fans and listeners get something special that people can't get elsewhere otherwise.
So Seth, on Sunday, I can go in, hit a link, pay with PayPal, and order your book. Is that correct?
I think so. I think that's actually going to happen.
Okay, I'm going to do that.
Yeah, you should do that.
I'll let you know if it's scary.
Yeah, well, so what's going to happen then is that I'll get a bunch of books to my house, sign them, and then ship them out to everybody, and it'll be a little while before you get it, but I'm happy, if you buy it, I'm happy to send you the ebook so that you can start reading on your device before that.
I want a signed copy, though.
You're going to get a signed copy. For you, I'm definitely going to sign a copy.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to sign it. I just got 2 in the mail today. These are the first 2 actual paper smelling books. I'm pretty excited. I think it looks good. Oh, look at the back. The back has a picture of me. I said, I'm not going to do anything else with writing text for the back. I'm just going to put a picture, just like Michael Connolly does. I saw a Michael Connolly book at the library. I said, I'm just going to put a picture of me with sneakers on the back. There you go.
Seth, who did you use for printing hard copies?
Okay, good question. So another part of the learning curve is that, so there was a website called CreateSpace that you could get your stuff on there, do print on demand, and they would upload it to Amazon for you, and you could buy copies from, you could order copies directly from CreateSpace. But now CreateSpace and Amazon have merged. Amazon bought CreateSpace, and so now CreateSpace doesn't exist anymore. So if you want to get copies on your own and actually get copies that will go to bookstores, you need to load your book onto Amazon KDP, and people can buy copies of it through that. And that's where I got these proof copies. And what you need to do is go to this company called Ingram Spark, which is a distributor, and they have a whole other thing where you can buy your own ISBN and load it through them, and then bookstores can get it. Because even if you're going through Amazon KDP, if bookstores want to buy your book for a reading or just to have it on the shelves, they're not going to like going through Amazon to get it. So you have to go through Ingram, and you can actually make it so that they can't do returns and stuff like that. But I haven't done the Ingram process yet. I just found this out 2 days ago from my friend who's a publisher. And, you know, these things are changing. So Ingram is where I'm going to get my copies.
How do you market to bookstores to get them to sell your book?
At this point, it's only going to happen for bookstores that I already have a relationship with.
Okay.
There's a couple stores that are friends with me, and they were not happy about me working with Amazon, Thomas and Mercer, as my publisher. And so they're happy that I'm not working with Thomas and Mercer for this book. So they're happy to stock it. And, you know, if I'm going to do a reading somewhere and they want to get them, I'll either bring them myself or they can order them through Ingram or through Ingram.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, this is my 7th book, and the rules change every time. The industry is in so much flux that the rules are constantly changing.
Quick question. So coming up this summer, I'll be hitting a couple battlefields and giving lectures. And I have not so much the books or anything that are ready to release, but I'm going to call them rather thick pamphlets. What would be your suggestion for afterwards for distributing that? And I'm trying to go off of that less is more. How do because I have the books at a date, but you know how that goes. I'm not nowhere near your level yet. So what would be your suggestion for afterwards when they're asking for material? Do I have that sat out? I have like the tables and all that stuff along that nature. How do I get like a pre-introductory, like this is something that's coming? What would be your quick kind of babble there?
Do you want to have it in hand when you go there?
Yes, I would like to have some of these things in hand, because what happens, to give you an example, I'm not going to name any of the battlefields yet, but when I'm out there and I'm giving my lecture, and some of these, they draw a significant crowd. Yeah. And so they would like something to take home with them that they can carry away. And at the same time, it's kind of a self-advertising for me. In your scenario, so when you do that, I'm just kind of curious, and I'm sort of looking into the future. Do you have them available, like as far as for signing, or how does that work? And what is your normal that you would bring with you, I guess?
Yeah, so I would bring a box of like 25. And if it's a bookstore, usually the bookstore will order them because they like to keep everything in-house that way. But at this point, because everything is sort of Wild West out here, I would just probably bring a box of them to the bookstore. If we sell them there, the bookstore would get a cut. And if it was me and I was going outside of a bookstore, I would just bring them, try to get a Square or something like that to charge on your phone so that you don't have to deal with a lot of cash. And you're talking about having people buy these, not give them away.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I would just order a bunch. You can order as many as you want. You know, the confusing thing that's frustrating me right now is that before CreateSpace and Amazon combined, you could load your book onto CreateSpace and not have it distributed to Amazon and order as many author copies as you want. But now when you upload it to KDP, if you order proofs, it has this junky thing right here that says not for resale all over the front. So the way to actually get author copies from that is to go through Ingram and do it through them. And
awesome.
And Ingram has this thing, if you go to their website, that it's supposed to be $49 for them to set up your ebook for you. But I have a code, so email me off list and I can pass the code along to you that will enable you to do this free. This is something else that I'm going to be figuring out this week because I want to order, a couple boxes of these.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Good question. But yeah, I think, once you get the PDF designed of that, you choose the size that you want, you get someone to design your cover and lay it out as a PDF. That's what you'd have to upload to the printers, and then you can order as many copies as you want. I feel like a lot of you guys are here for craft questions, so let's hit a craft question. This is exciting. I'm high energy today. It's nice to see you guys. Or publishing questions are fine. Either way. Sandy. I'm going to unmute you.
Absolutely nothing about it. And if I should be so lucky to have something, to publish, these are things to know. I did hear that writers don't like to deal with Amazon or just start selling their books on Amazon because then the bookstores don't want any part of selling their books. Is that true?
There's nothing that's entirely true, but so Amazon, right now what I'm doing with Amazon is that I'm publishing the book there independently and printing it myself through print on demand. What I've done in the past was work with one of Amazon's publishing wings, which was Thomas and Mercer. They do crime and mystery, and they have a whole basically publishing house, just like any other publishing house. And when you're working with them, yeah, bookstores don't want to carry your stuff. Like even the bookstores that were my best friends were like, no, we can't carry this book because we do not want to do business with Amazon. They just view them as enemies. And I was working on I was doing a conference in the Bay Area at a bookstore, and I had been on faculty once before, and I was scheduled to be on faculty, and they blackballed me from the faculty when they found out that I was using Amazon to publish with. And for me, it was a money decision. It was like Amazon sold a lot of copies of that book, and they were really doing the promotion and marketing that I needed a publisher to do at the time. So for me, it was a money decision to go with them, and I wasn't going to get anything from being in the conference. So, it was a no-brainer. But, it's weird when people sort of flip on you like that based on having a relationship with a certain publisher or something like that. But so in 2013, when Amazon published In Broad Daylight, they did great with it. But then all of the Amazon imprints had so much growth, and they introduced something called Prime Reading, so that their promotional machine, as far as promoting my book when it came out in 2015, Everyone Pays, the promotional machine wasn't nearly as good. So along with that and a few other things that have changed in the industry, I've decided to do it myself for this book. And I'm just going to see how it goes. And depending on how I feel about this, I'll either do a next book myself or work with a publisher. This is the first time I've ever done a Jack Palms novel myself. I did the short stories myself just because I wanted to get them out. But right now it feels like a lot of work, and so I'm gonna see how it all works out. But part of it being a lot of work and getting to control it myself is that I can do these crazy things like setting it up on Patreon, having people be able to get into the acknowledgements, selling signed copies before it's released, fun things like that. And in the past, that's been one of the real highlights is connecting with people who listen to the books and want the print copies, having that kind of excitement from them, and then feeling like, yeah, okay, these people are excited to get the book. That's been like a universal positive for me as a writer, compared to like sometimes even getting into Barnes and Nobles. there's downsides of it. The books might not be on the shelf when you want them to be. They might not be on the shelf for very long. They might just be spine out. All these different things could happen. So really just using the internet to connect directly with readers has been really exciting and positive for me as an experience. We've been going over some really important grounding stuff in my Stanford class lately. We just to shift gears a little bit, we've been talking really about grounding scenes. We've been doing dialogue and action and really getting into the kind of grounding where we're talking about characters' bodies. We're talking about taking actions and splitting them up so that we can see the specific pieces of it. I guess for some of you guys that have been through the classes already, Kate or Jen, Lynn, Liz, any of you guys, what would you tell Melanie and Sandy, who are just starting to get into this grounding business, about what it really looks like to start to slow down your scenes and put the characters into the reader's visual experience?
I think it makes the story so much richer when you slow down. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things I learned in your class and in your group was how to do that. And I think it's overall improved my writing. It's been one of the things that's improved my writing the most. Because I feel like I can follow a character through all of his or her actions with his body. I see what he or she sees when she sees it. So it kind of puts me in her footsteps as it happens rather than just summarizing, here's what happened.
Yeah, I mean, your writing has been like going like gangbusters with this new novel. I'm always excited to get a new segment of it. For you, like, what was the thing early on that either like got you to buy in and understand how to slow down? Like, how did you go from like, I want to slow down, I'm not sure what he's saying, to like, this is how I do it, and now it's really working the way that you're doing it?
I think it was some of the examples you gave in class or in group where you would just take like a paragraph and you would show us, here's what the person originally had versus here's how we could actually show the person taking the pot out of the cabinet and putting it on the oven and putting the ingredients in it. So I think it was actually seeing you do it side by side that was interesting.
Yeah, I just did that on one of your assignments today, Sandy. I was looking at the one.
That's really helpful to me because I have a problem with this. And I just looked at the exercise for next week.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go back and change it. And
but did you see the comment? I just put comments.
I haven't seen it yet, but
So hold on. So I just saw your exercise for week 3, and you had a girl and a mom in the kitchen, and the girl was like washing the asparagus. It says she washed the asparagus and laid them out on a plate. And so then I slowed it down to say something like, she took the asparagus out of the plastic bag that it had come in, put them on the cutting board and started cutting off the thick bottoms of them, then leading from that to dialogue. So it's like I'm seeing a lot of stuff really summarized in some of these student pieces from early in the class. And then, yeah, exactly. Like I literally was like writing slowed down stuff on your assignment earlier today.
Well, if you do that, that's what I need to know. You're having the person do all of this stuff. In writing, you want them to be talking at the same time, right? I mean,
no, they don't have to.
So you don't have to. So it should be dialogue and movement.
Yeah, interspersed, like back and forth.
Okay, got it. I didn't really understand that, but now I do. That's extremely helpful.
Yeah, this was a big one for you too, Lynn.
Yeah, it was. And I think if I was going to give a rule of thumb, I would say if you slow it down to the point where you think it's slow enough, that's probably only halfway there. If you feel like you're drawing it out so much, it's got to be driving your reader and everybody else crazy. That's probably just about right. So you can always go back and edit out things that are too much, but I really didn't realize how fully developed a scene could be in my head and how poorly developed it could be on the page, and how a reader, it's not obvious to the reader what's in my head. So you really have to grit your teeth to get it all out there.
Yeah. And you being a doctor makes you even more concise, and that's another thing that you were fighting.
Right.
But that's the same with me. I'm a scientist, and when I first started writing, just killing me, because in science you've got data, you write, very specific, and then now this carries over into fiction, into writing, creative writing, and I have had in the last 2 years really had to learn a lot from that.
It's totally different.
Oh,
Totally.
We write in passive voice too, right? Like we default to passive voice, and God, it's just a killer. And now when I read papers, it just makes me rip my hair out. I'm like, just say what the cell is doing.
Well, one of the other things too was people in classes were telling me, this is a nice story, but people don't talk like that. My dialogue was terrible. It was very structured. People don't talk like that.
Yeah.
So
You have to try reading your dialogue out loud. The other thing that we did in the Harvard class that we don't have time to do in the Stanford class is we have people go out into the world and get pieces of found dialogue and force them to write them down. And when they do, they realize that nothing that they get is actually a sentence. And so that gives them some insight into what it's like to write dialogue and how, using sentences often doesn't work. The other thing is changing the whole mindset. So yesterday in class, someone asked the question, how do I know when my description is too much? Like if I start ramping it up, when is it going to be too much? And that's always the question that people start with. But the flip side of that is, when is it going to be enough? And if that's your concern, then you just go in the other direction to doing more and more and more. But people start out with this thing that's sort of holding them back from doing more because they're worried, oh, immediately it's going to be too much, and then people are going to be bored. And so, Jen and Lynn have seen after a while, it's like, yeah, I really have to figure out, is it enough as opposed to too much? Because when you start out with that mindset of, I'm going to bore the reader if I slow down at all, it's the wrong way to be thinking about things.
Yeah. It's very helpful.
Well, I like to look at, because I'm a very visual writer. And so I kind of look at the things that I'm writing on the page as like, what would a director focus on if it were a movie? And so if you were talking about the asparagus or something like that, if that, is like a close shot of the asparagus and then had meaning, then, that's what I would focus on. But I wouldn't focus on, what the lamp looked like or something like that if it had nothing to do with the story. You wouldn't have that shot in a movie. And so I think you have to pick and choose which pieces that you're focusing on, as they relate to the story. And that's how I tend to look at it.
And as they relate to the character. I was just looking at a piece where someone had just gotten a ransom call. Their husband was just kidnapped. And then, it's a terrible phone call. She walks across the living room that's lightly decorated with a pastiche of this and nice drapes and this. And it's like, from the character's point of view, there's no way she cares about those decorations right now. She's freaking out. Her mind is going crazy. It's the wrong place for that description. So, if you don't know when to do that kind of stuff, just getting into the head of the character and really imagining how he or she would see it is always a really good rule of thumb. But if you're doing the movie thing, it's like if I say in one sentence, she got the asparagus ready and dried it off on a rack, there's not enough there for me to really see. In a movie, we could see it, but if you just write that on the page, it's not enough for me to really see what the character is doing to the point where I can see her body. And you've also been having places in your writing, Liz, where it's not visual enough on the page. How are you navigating, even being a visual writer, how are you navigating the point where you need to get more onto the page?
Well, if we're going with the same movie idea, I think of it okay, you have this scene and what are the different takes you could have. So, like do it this way, do it from this point of view, and kind of like play with the different angles that you could be coming at it from. And that's something that I'm trying to, I'm still obviously working on that, but, looking at, you have a situation, but then you also need to like have different takes from different angles to figure out like what's the story that you're trying to tell. What are the important details that you want to show, and the mood of the character is obviously, like you said, going to affect that. But yeah,
I
I
was
have
going to say,
I go really fast with my writing because I'm like, nobody cares about asparagus, so I'm just going to gloss over that. So, so that's something I'm trying to slow down.
yeah, it's an ongoing battle. Yeah, I mean, one thing that I was going to say is like, just how all these different takes visually, but then also keeping in mind, how is the view of the world affected by the main character's emotional state or feelings? I'm just taking a few notes on what subjects we're covering today.
So I have a question if we're done on whatever topic that was.
Yeah.
Some of you know I'm writing a novel that takes place in Jamaica, and I'm going down there in a couple of weeks, and I just built in extra time for research.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering if people have had experience with, reality of a place versus imagined reality of a place, because I have a lot in my head, and I've been to this place where I'm going in Jamaica before. So I don't want too much to interfere with my interior world, but I also feel like I'm needing to get some reality-based facts. So I'm kind of, I guess, walking a fine line between these two worlds. And I'm wondering if anybody's had any experience with that in terms of how they go about research, whether they limit their access to stimulation or not, or what.
One thing that I would say about that is that I understand what you're saying about the fine line, but there's another point where you're in control of not wanting to change stuff that you've already written and not wanting to change sort of your own world of that setting that you've set up. And you go there and you see these things that are visually really interesting. And so it enables you to add all this texture and specifics into the thing. So it's like, and then it becomes very easy to write. It's like if you go there and there's a giant statue of a banana, then you write that in, it's easy to write, and it's crazy things just come in. When I was doing research on the Tenderloin in San Francisco, I sort of had the whole idea of the story in my head, but then I would go down there and just some of the things that I would see, it blows your mind. But when you actually have an idea of like what the 2-block radius is like around this church, when the characters are moving in it, it gives you all these things that you can go to that really fill out the scenes for you.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I was thinking too. Yeah. I think I was going to be very stimulated, and it's going to be exciting and hopefully break open some new aspects of the story.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying about the possible drawbacks, but I would also say there's some real possible benefits because it can give you like, sort of a treasure trove to draw from of really colorful and specific, interesting details.
Okay, great.
Does anyone else want to respond to that on research?
Well, just that part about in the King book about just picking out the 3 or 4 things that make that scene come alive to you, because if you put too much detail in, you're buried. Of course, you're going to get as much detail as possible to choose from. I mean, I went to Monterey to research the book I'm working on for the novel class, and basically drove around the naval base for a day. But the detail that came through was standing at the beach later with my kids and hearing them play Reveille.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, that was dumb luck. That was us eating a chicken sandwich on the beach and the kids messing around in the sand. But it was such a piercingly clear moment that it set that entire context scene in place. So the fact that you're there, you just soak it in. You look around. It's accidental.
Yeah.
It's real experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just going to just record basically everything.
Well, and I think another thing to consider is how you want to present Jamaica to the reader. Because the novel I'm writing takes place in Salem, Massachusetts, and there's a lot of different ways to look at Salem. You know, teenagers go there and they're hunting for ghosts and it's all creepy and cool. And my husband went there and he's a scholar of religious history. And he was like, this is a cheesy tourist trap and a complete waste of our money. So, you know, not complete waste, like, but you know, like he looked at it and was like, okay, this place is ridiculous. So you can kind of control with which details you pick how you want to present the location as well, because different characters would interpret it differently.
Right. Right. And even different characters within this book. I mean, there's native Jamaicans, there's white tourists, there's, you know, tourists who are there like a lot of the year. There's very different types of people in here who are going to obviously see Jamaica in very different, within different frameworks. So yeah, thank you. That's really helpful.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, John.
I got a question for you. How would you do, so to give you an example, they're holding a Lincoln Death Train reenactment here on April 21st at the actual site where the train passed over. And I was going to use that for a source later on to bring up. But how do you do a transition, or what would be a quick way? And I know I'm asking a big question here. What would be an easy way doing that less is more type of methodology to do a transition of, remember back in the day, it's April 21st, 1865, and now I'm bringing the reader up to current time on the rail bed. Here's a recreated train. What do you keep in mind to where you're going to transition now over 160 years?
Wow. So you're talking about a nonfiction piece where you're doing a history and then you want to talk about this recreation?
Yes, sir.
And the recreation is of what? I just got to get this right.
Oh, sure. So what happened after President Lincoln was assassinated, after he laid in state? They put him on a train. His body was on a train, and it traveled through about 200 cities. And one of the cities it came through is where I'm at right now in Harrisburg, and wound up going through Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania. They're going to do a reenactment there, and I'm going to be in full regalia and lecture and things of that nature. But later on, I want to use this as a talking point, and I also want to put it in one of my books. But what I'm struggling with is, how do I introduce that? Here's the history, here's the actual site and the location, and here's what's there now. And I'm trying to figure out, I have it, but it's gigantic. I'm trying to figure out how to keep it in a page or two to tell the whole story, to paint the picture. Yes, and a transition between, here's the actual site 165 or 159 years ago. Here it is today that you can come visit.
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing that I would say, and this applies to a lot of the discussions that we're having about fiction as well, is that transitions are a thing. Transitions are a place where readers can have difficulty following the writer. Like when you have a transition, it's difficult sometimes for a reader to get through it. And so primarily, if you know you're making a transition, then you're in good shape. Better shape than if you don't know. So if you just like slam these two things together, then the reader's going to have problems. But what you're talking about in terms of just saying to the reader very clearly, now I want to talk about this thing that's happening now in 2019, I think that kind of signpost is really effective. You could also use a space break, but because you're looking at a transition on the back end of this as well, it's like what we're talking about for the fiction, which is that slow down. Like if it's important to you to put in this thing about the death train, once you get the reader to have gone from one place to the place where you're giving this present day thing, take your time there. Don't feel like you have to slam through it quickly. Like do the transition quickly and clearly, but then once you're to this next thing that you think is really important, let the reader stay there and sort of get comfortable in that place before you switch back to the history again. So it's like what I'm seeing in some of the fiction is we have 3 different scenes in like a 2-page piece, and this is what happens when all the actions are summarized. And so when you actually start to slow things down, a given scene might take 2 pages or 10 pages, and that's actually good for a reader. Like a reader likes being in that. So if I would say if you're choosing to make the Lincoln Death Train important enough to put in, do the transition so that it's clear, which you're already going to do fine because you know that it's a transition and you're consciously thinking about how you're going to do it. And then once you get there, give it the full space it deserves so that the reader can understand why you think this is interesting. Let it really show on the page that this is interesting to you, just like the girl who's it's not that the asparagus is so interesting to the reader or to the writer, but it's like if this character is in the kitchen and the character is important, then we want to be able to see that character and know that that character has a body and know that the kitchen counter comes up to her shoulders because she's only 7 years old, or comes up to her waist because she's an adult. If you're gonna create a scene or give us some information about a present day period, just invest the interest and care into that so that it's slow enough for the reader to really take part in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Without knowing exactly like what you're, writing and stuff, just my thought on the transition would be to focus on one aspect and then juxtapose it to the modern time and then zoom out with whatever you want to say about the modern time. So I don't know what the difference is, but say, it looks like this in the old days and it looks like this right now, like one little piece, and then that could be your transition to flip into modern time. I don't know. That's just my thought on that.
But I think, the priority also is clarity. Just be clear. How about you, Nell?
Yeah, I was going to say that the same thing as Liz in terms of, they would have been passing X, but now they're passing Y. Something either that would have been very different or something that is exactly the same. Something that is a segue that links. You need connective tissue, right? Either it's completely different or it's completely the same, but something that links the past to the present is what I was going to suggest.
I love your use of the phrase connective tissue. It's fast becoming one of my favorites. And it's so the connective tissue is what happens when people slow down. It's like, the way that she chops the asparagus isn't that, you could look at it and say it's not interesting, but if you start showing that she knows that if you just take a stalk of asparagus and bend it, it will break at the point between where it's okay to eat and where it's not okay to eat. And if someone does that, then as a reader, you're like, oh, that's interesting. I want to try that with my asparagus. Or it's like, oh, I know they do asparagus the same way I do it. And so, it's that connective tissue that really makes the scene alive and helps it connect with the readers. I love asparagus.
I have a question. In my novel, I have a fair amount of interviewing going on. An investigative reporter is investigating a cold case, and she's interviewing people that were around the time of the murders. And it's an interview, and I've watched Barbara Walters films and everything, because people tell me you sort of have a talking head situation. But the problem is, if you're interviewing somebody and it's a very serious conversation, do you want stuff going on? Is that distracting to the reader?
You can't just have dialogue.
Huh?
And I saw it in your piece this morning. It's like long tracts of dialogue. You can't have that. They have to have bodies that are doing something. So it's like if I'm watching Barbara Walters on TV, at some point she's going to cross her legs. Somebody's going to drink water.
Mhm.
Just on TV, they have bodies and it's clear. and it's there for you visually. As a reader, if you're just getting all dialogue, it gets really stale because there's no visual there. It's like you're in some sort of black box theater with the lights off, and it just becomes words on a page instead of characters speaking them. But that's one of the tricks, is to have people doing things that you find interesting. So it's like, maybe you like cooking, maybe you like drinking coffee, maybe you like taxidermy or sanding pieces of wood. When you get your characters to do things that you have experience with and you can really visualize, it's going to make the writing better.
Has anybody read any Barbara Vargas? She's that French crime writer. Oh, I was just curious because I'm reading one of her novels, and she's very loose with point of view, and I'm really enjoying it. And she makes you work to kind of figure out, all right, whose point of view? And she doesn't always have a point of view. She really weaves things together in a way that's kind of loose, and I'm kind of enjoying it and learning a lot from it, and sort of trying to move away from a more workman-like, strict point of view. And I know that that's important, and I know you have to orient readers, but I just was curious if anybody had read any of her stuff, because it's really fun and inventive, and she just doesn't seem to care about some of these rules around like clarity.
Is it contemporary?
But anyway, what?
Is it published now?
Yeah, I guess she's written a lot of books. Someone just told me about her.
It might be different like if we're talking about something in translation, it might be different in French.
Right.
And so there's a couple of variables there, but going back to John's question about transitions, it's like I see some student pieces where there's transitions of point of view all over the place, and it's like, if you don't know that you're making those transitions, it's one thing to know that there are point of view transitions and say, okay, I know I'm doing this, but I'm going to just get loose with it, and the reader will deal with it. But the thing that's really pernicious is when you don't know that you're making transitions. So when I was reading Sandy's piece, I didn't know if it was the mother's point of view or the daughter's point of view. And because I don't know the point of view, then I'm confused. And then one person goes into a room, and it must be that person's point of view because I'm getting what she sees and the other character's not there.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
We had an interesting piece in workshop where Haneen was doing a whole bunch of things in point of view, and she really knew what she was doing, and it worked well.
And she switched off from different points of view.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was very fluid, but it is, you have to know that you're doing it, and you have to realize that it's raising the degree of difficulty.
Right.
Otherwise, you end up with Mrs. Dalloway or To the Lighthouse. And though some of us might love those books, a lot of people can't read them at all.
Right.
And that was almost 100 years ago. It was a very different time. I want to show this to Bennett. Bennett just got here. He's been waiting for this.
Look, show me the back. Show me the back.
Oh, yeah. It's me. It's me at a sneaker store in New York City called Flight Club, where they have every sneaker ever, and you can buy any of them, and like based on the demand for it, the prices just go up and down. And so it's like every sneaker that's ever made is there, and some of them are thousands of dollars, and some of them are hundreds of dollars.
But no 25 words inside the flap.
No, there are no flaps. It's paperback.
Yeah, with the back cover.
I jettisoned that whole idea. Michael Connolly can do it.
It's a picture's worth 1,000 words.
There you go. I couldn't fit 1,000 words on here. It's
Seth,
a goofy picture of me with a coffee cup in a sneaker store.
Seth, in 3 sentences, can you say what your fascination with sneakers is about, or what it means? 3 sentences.
I just answered this.
Oh, you did?
Something that I was writing.
Oh.
No, I was going to read it for you. I thought that would be so good.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Okay, I have it. Hold on. So the question, okay, good. The biggest challenge in writing this book was staying current on sneakerhead lore, sneaker releases, and sneaker facts. But it was also the biggest opportunity because getting to really get into my love of sneakers, past and present, was very exciting. That was terrible. So, yeah, so maybe just reading this isn't such a good answer. So what was the question again?
What is the essence of your obsessional fascination with sneakers? And I don't mean, I just
when I
want
was
to
in
know.
high school, these Jordan sneakers started coming out, and I couldn't afford them, but they were the coolest thing. And I was a very different kind of basketball player than Michael Jordan, so I didn't think that they fit with my game. But throughout high school and college, I was like going to what are you going to do? You go to the mall and you look at what sneakers are out. I don't know why. And so the crazy thing is that now, a million years later, the same sneakers that were coming out back then are still the coolest sneakers. All the kids still want the sneakers that I wanted then because they're re-releasing the exact same ones or like different versions of those every week, and kids are still buying them. So as I got back into this, I realized that I could buy the sneakers that look the same as the ones that I wanted 20 years ago or more. And so it's amazing to be able to collect them, but also there's this whole giant sneakerhead community and world that I thought was fascinating to start looking into.
Okay.
And then I found myself researching. Hi, Willa. My daughter's home. She says hi. So, and then like looking at 90s and 80s basketball, I was really into that as well. So be able to tell it. The thing that I thought was so fun about this was to be able to write a crime story about a subculture that nobody's written about, sneaker stuff. Like the books on sneaker stuff I could list on one hand that are actually good, and nobody has done it in the crime world. And to be able to combine crime with like Jordan era awesome basketball legends was also really fun. So like the sneakerhead subculture, the sneakers that are still around, collecting those, and the basketball lore, and this crazy sort of conspiracy theory about Jordan's first retirement, to be able to dig into that stuff was really interesting to me. Because
Seth,
we're really excited. What?
Oh.
Go
I was
ahead.
wondering if do you read Chuck Wendig's blog? Ever?
No.
Okay, he has a really good story or book called Damn Fine Story that's like about writing, but he also
I know him.
Yeah, he's awesome. So, but he had a recent blog post about the story that you tell about the story and how important it is to like really, because you're going to get asked about, like, why did you write this? What's this, all that sort of thing. And kind of like the different angles that you look at the lens of your story through when you're talking to different people. And so, for your story, it'd be like, if you're talking to sneakerheads, it would be about the sneakerhead. If you're talking to more crime people, you talk about like the crime elements and kind of like all the different facets of your story and how you talk about that when you're talking to different audiences. And so that would be.
So how did I just do?
I thought it was pretty good, but I'm not a sneakerhead. So.
No, you're not a sneakerhead, but I didn't talk to you about the Jordan 11s compared to the Jordan 4s and the
right.
Yeezy Red Octobers.
Yeah, but I think knowing like why that's important to you and like the story about your childhood wanting the sneakers, like I think that speaks to me about why this is important to you.
Well, the other thing that's interesting is that, I have my obsessions, and it's like when I dig into a book and start writing something about it, and start writing something, like this whole thing about the sneakers came out of nowhere. Like I just wanted to write a piece that took place in Hawaii, and the sneaker thing came out of nowhere. And then once I started diving into it, it just ignited so much passion in me because I was digging into this thing that I've been repressing or not spending money on because that's crazy. Why? How could you have 20 pairs of sneakers? That's nuts. I don't have 20 pairs of sneakers. And, so to get into that passion, to me, I think it makes the writing better. And we all have our obsessions. And if you just sort of like get into a story, the obsessions will get onto the page, let them. But yeah, I mean, that thing about the business of pitching is totally true. But because of the way I have more passion for this book than I've had for anything else, except for Young Junius, which I also had a ton of passion about, because that was from my early years as well. But it's like all the business aspects of making the pitch is really smart. And if you're really passionate about your book, lead with the passion, because I think that's universal. It's like, oh, wow, like there's something really exciting here. And so it just makes it more fun to talk about it too. How about if we do a brief reading from the book before we leave for today?
Yeah.
I'll read from a random page. Somebody pick a number.
65.
79.
Let's see which one is better.
Oh,
Oh, 65 is very short. And 79. Oh, 79 is good. Okay, all right, so I'll give you a brief thing from 65 and then give you the rest from 79. 65. I hadn't laid eyes on a single cop since I'd landed in Kauai, if that was any indication. In any case, I didn't stop. I gave the barracuda a break to lick its wounds. There's actually a bar in Kauai called the barracuda, 2 words. And that's the kind of stuff, like you could sit here and never go to Jamaica and never come up with something that ridiculous. And then once you go there, it's like, oh, of course that goes in because it's ridiculous and it's real. Maybe my big city ass could cruise around doing damage and not get kicked in the teeth. I was hoping as much. It was a nice thought if it held. If it didn't, I didn't plan to be around long. And page 79 is the beginning of chapter 16, which is called The Long Goodbye. I named the title, I titled the chapters in this book. This is the first time I've ever done this, and it was fun.
Are they all named after Raymond Chandler?
No, but thank you for noticing that. Shout out to Raymond Chandler, who's one of the best crime writers ever. And The Long Goodbye is like the best crime novel ever. It's right up there with Red Harvest. And I would argue that pound for pound, it's the best. It's like The Great Gatsby of crime novels. So The Long Goodbye. Outside, I drove my Jeep up the street. When I was far enough away that I couldn't see the house, and I was sure no one could see me from it, I pulled over and shut off the car. Something told me Modi was still in that house, hiding, waiting. If the brothers were trying to collect money from him, and he had it, stolen from San Francisco, I wasn't sure why he'd come all this way and not pay them. But then his mother had said something about the house. Maybe his priority was to the bank, not the Kaloas. I probably would have gone the same way, though having a roof over your mother's head looked a whole lot worse if visits from thugs like those became frequent. Times like these, waiting in the night, killing time for the next thing to happen, were when I still missed smoking. I patted myself down, even checked the compartment between the seats, knowing there was no way I'd find a pack. So I leaned back and searched the sky for shooting stars. As soon as I knew I could count on the Kaloas being gone, I was going back to the house. Instead of smoking, I counted breaths, a trick I had picked up from Chan and his meditation. I tried to make each breath go slow, counting the inhale and the exhale, stretching and contracting my rib cage. What adrenaline I'd had from the fight started to seep away, and eventually things began to slow. There you go. So that's, so if this guy's in his car passing time, getting him into the breathing and thinking about that, maybe you've tried a breathing exercise before. Maybe there's some connection between the character and the reader that sort of solidifies things, but it also does something on the page that's a lot more than just saying in summary, I waited for 5 minutes and then turned around. It takes up space on the page and lets the reader really get into it.
And Seth, really fast, so you chose first person point of view for this book.
This book's got first person point of view.
Yeah, and like Jack Wakes Up was third person, right?
That's right. And Jack Bakes Up was also present tense, and this is past tense and first person.
So how'd you decide that?
Good question. I think I've gravitated towards first person in the last two books, In Broad Daylight and Everyone Pays, with the different characters. And I like it right now. I don't know. I think that sometimes the point of view decisions can be a little bit arbitrary, but the important thing is knowing that you're doing it, knowing how you're doing it, and then maintaining the consistency there. But I like the idea of Jack telling his own story. The thing that was great about third person was being able to really spread out and do different points of view, like in Young Junius. But for this book, that's not the plan. So thank you guys for being here. I hope you're on the mailing list and got my email today where I revealed the cover. If not, I'm happy to put you on that email list. And in any case, thanks for being here. I'll be back soon, and I'll have more to say about the new release and more about your craft stuff. If you go to the Patreon, I'll have the recording for this in a couple of days, and I'll have the recording to my email list as well.
And Sunday you can buy the book.
Sunday you can buy the book. The website is coming. I'll show you guys the website one more time. It's over here on Patreon, where you can get all the good stuff and listen to some of the episodes. And this is going to be the page on my website. Nobody can get to it yet, but it's going to have the PayPal button and everything.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks for being here, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
Seth.
you.